Okay, so the next thing Planning does is try to explore what are maybe other ways to show that evolution and theism conflict if you combine evolution with maybe some other theses or things that come along with evolution. So he's going to suggest three. These are in your handout. One is evolution undercuts the design argument. Evolution consists in a lot of suffering. And unguided evolution is simpler than guided evolution. So these are common things people to say to try to show that evolution and belief in God are inconsistent. Evolution undercuts the design argument. What's that talking about? Well, in the past, people used to think things like, well, look how well designed the eye looks, uh, or how do we get all this complexity in the world? There has to be a God, right? Um, well, what evolution did was it gave us a mechanism with Darwinism that could explain why we would have all this life even without God. So, in that way, evolution undercut that design argument. Okay. Now, Plantinga goes into a lot of detail for these points in this section. I'm just going to give the broad strokes, like main sort of responses Plantinga gives, and that's what you should make sure you know. I encourage you to try to know more of the details on your own, but um, right. Um, so one thing is Plantinga is skeptical. Excuse me. Plantinga is skeptical that um, evolution, unguided evolution, could easily explain all the biological complexity we have. He tells a story about Michael Behe, but we can put that aside and just note Planning is skeptical about that. That will make us go into an argument beyond what I want us to go through in this class. The point I want to emphasize from Planning is this. This doesn't show a conflict with theism if for a theist, let's say, if your belief in theism isn't based on this biological design argument. For example, you might believe in God on the basis of the fine tuning argument or the cosmological argument combined in the way Rhoda does. Or what Plantinga suggests is maybe you believe in God not on the basis of argument, but on the basis of like a powerful religious experience, what he calls the sensus divinitatis, like a sense of the divine. So there might be some experience of God, and maybe that's why you believe in God, not because of the biological design argument. If so, then you don't have to worry that evolution undercuts the biological design argument because you already have other reasons for believing in God. Okay, that's number one. Number two, evolution consists in a lot of suffering. So you have to believe, if you're going to believe in evolution, that evolution is uh, consists in death, right? I mean, evolution has to happen by way of animals dying, animals often killing each other, and you have to say that's the mechanism by which God used to create creatures and humans. That seems somehow contradictory of theistic belief. Okay. Well, the thing that Plantinga notes is that this is really just pushing a version of the problem of evil, and there's a lot of theistic replies to the problem of evil. Some that have been given by a number of different philosophers, some that we've discussed in this class. You could take some of the ways Rhoda suggests, or you could be a skeptical theist. Plantinga gives his own interesting solution, what's called the Ophelix culpa theodicy. You don't have to know that, but just know, look, this is really just falling under the problem of evil, and it's something theists have already dealt with. Okay, now I want to say there's some in recent philosophy of religion. Some have thought that the problem of animal suffering actually is a little bit worse in some ways than the problem of human suffering. So this question leaves a lot to be explored. I think so. There's a lot more to say about this one, but I'm only going to give summary points. And lastly, Plantinga doubts part three, that unguided evolution is simpler than guided evolution. Okay. Plantinga notes two things. One, unguided evolution might be simpler, but he's skeptical that it might be able to create all the life that we have. You might have needed guided evolution for that. That's his first point. Now, whether that's true really goes back to whether the biological design argument is a good argument. That we need the idea of a design. Well, there needs to be a designer to explain all the biological evolution we got to today. Um, Okay, that's his first response. We're not going to dig into it because that requires understanding and going to the thick arguments about biological design argument. Um, what Planning is going to note is a similar thing that he mentioned in his response to here, which is suppose unguided evolution is simpler than guided evolution. That might mean that if we're trying to say what's the best explanation, God did it or it was unguided. Um, it might be that the unguided explanation is better, and Planning says that might be fine. But you might still have other reasons to believe in God, and hence that God designed evolution. Um, so that's not really going to be a problem. So because the belief in God might be independently accepted. So you might say the reason I believe, so a theist might say, the reason I believe that God designed and was behind evolution is not because it's the best explanation for why we get all the evolution, all the life that we have today. It's more, there's evolution that happened. I already have independent reasons to believe in God. Um, and so that leads me to think that God probably had a hand in the evolution. Uh, we're not accepting it, Planning says, because it's the best explanation or the simplest explanation of how we got all the life we have today. All right, he supports that with an arrowhead example. You're wondering, should I think this rock that kind of looks like arrowhead, should I think that it came about by chance, by erosion, or should I think that it was designed by other humans? Well, let's say you knew there were no other humans in this area, right? That kind of it might give you a reason to think that there were humans, or might make you doubt whether you really knew that there were humans. But Plinius says it's a completely different story if you already believe that there were humans in the area, right? If that's so, then it doesn't matter whether the erosion story is simpler than the human story. So that's the example Plantinga gives on page. Where is that? He gives that on page 12. Or he talks about it on page 11 to 12. So yeah. Sorry, page 14. Okay, so on that, that's some of what he says. So when we're trying to find a conflict, when we're wondering whether there's a conflict between theism and evolution, Planning is more interested in the case of someone who might already believe in God for other reasons, okay? And then does the science give them a reason or pressure on their theistic belief? And Planning is saying no.